Yo, Boom Man here. Today, we're gonna be doing something different. We're gonna be ranking each styles, and see how each of them is doing in the current meta. A little disclaimer, this list is based on my experience using and going against each respective styles. Alright, enough yapping, let's just get into it. Alright, let's start with basic. Basic is basic. It's got no gimmick or anything. What it has, however, are well-rounded stats. It is simple, yet surprisingly strong. Decent base damage, good block and dash. Although its startup is pretty slow, its overall balance makes up for it, making it a great beginner style. This style is great at what it does, which is to teach new players of the fundamentals. Although this is pretty much a tutorial style, this style is able to go toe-to-toe with its more complex cousins. This style belongs to the A tier. Next is counter. Counter is a pretty simple style. It's like basic, but with less base damage, faster punch startups, and stronger counters. Compared to other counter styles, it isn't too dependent on counters when it comes to dealing damage. Although this may sound good on paper, this style is pretty lackluster in the current meta, as the only thing it brings to the table is its bonus counter damage. This doesn't mean that counter is useless though. You can delete your opponent's health if you know how to time your punches well. With that being said, counter is an average style that is really strong if used correctly. This lands counter at C tier. Now, long guard. Long guard is the introduction of outboxing to beginners. If you're not familiar, this refers to a fighting style where you maintain your distance and use your range to your advantage. Looking onto this style's stats, it's got above average range, especially on its M2s. It also has a pretty fast startup, but that's really it. Other than range and punch speed, long guard falls short on other departments, especially on damage. This style is pretty fun to use, but since its only strengths are range and slightly above average speed, long guard will be our first D tier. Next up is Smash. I'm sure we're all familiar to this style's strength. Smash has the balance of basic, but with a much stronger M2. It also deals bonus damage on blocks, allowing you to smash your opponent by penetrating their guard. This style has one downside, however. Its M2s are slower, so once your opponent gets its timing, they'll be able to perfect dodge it consistently. But this doesn't really hold back Smash, since feints exist. This is an easy S tier. For the last uncommon style, we have Turtle. Judging by its name alone, it's pretty obvious what this style is good at. Sporting a very strong guard that quickly recovers. This style is a defensive powerhouse. Good damage, standard startup, but weak dashes. What it lacks in mobility, however, it makes up for in defensive prowess, which earns it a spot on the B tier. Now, onto the rare styles. We have the Charge style, a textbook over aggressive infighter. Good damage, average startup, and good dashes makes the style reliable at pressuring opponents. Its over-aggressive playstyle, however, could put you in dangerous situations. Having no backdash, this style only knows offense. All things considered, this is still a strong style. Couple it with its stamina saps, and you'll have your opponent lose their composure. This style sits at A tier, right beside basic. Next is Corkscrew, the style of the former national champion, AYEEE himself. This style has one of the most broken passives in the game, as the rate at which it regens health is absurd. Its recovery speed is the fastest in the game. Couple that with a solid block, decent dashes, and smashes M2 damage on its Corkscrew punch, and you've got a style fit for a champion. This is another S right above Smash. Next is Hammer. This is a pretty interesting one, as it can be a little inconsistent. This style got well-rounded stats overall, having decent damage, dash, and block. But its ability, Body Blow, although strong, can be really inconsistent. Sometimes it'll lock your opponent during the ability, and other times, it's just a free perfect dodge opportunity. I'm not sure if this style is functioning properly. I feel like it needs a hotfix, since it feels a little half-baked with its current state. If this style performs a little more consistently, it'd be a contender for A or even S tier, but currently, Hammer will be at C below counter. Next is Kamur. Don't be fooled by this style's subpar damage. If you get caught by this style, prepare to say goodbye to your mobility. This style's body blows will ensure that you'll move slower than Turtle for the duration of the round. However, in order to maintain the debuff, you gotta play aggressively. As it wears off slowly, the more your opponent stays clear of your punches, which puts you at risk of getting perfect dodged or countered. But overall, this style is very strong, which is why it'll sit comfortably at S tier. Next is everyone's favorite Frogger, AYEEE's unorthodox style, or commonly known in the game as the Trickster style. Stat-wise, Trickster is very strong. It's got the damage and the startup speed. This style is only held back by its fragile block, but it's understandable, since it's an evasive style. Speaking of evasiveness, Trickster's dashes got no end lag, making it very hard for your opponent to catch you. This also makes Trickster hard to predict, since it makes it hard to pinpoint where they'll be. Trickster favors players who know how to dodge, since it can't rely too much on blocking for defense. With that being said, Trickster is a solid S. Now, moving on to Mythics. First is the bullet style. In a nutshell, this is what this style is. Yeah, bullet style has the strongest counter damage potential in the game. Pair this with fast jabs, and you got a counter monster. Although its base damage is below average, your jab speed allows you to consistently chip away at your opponent's health. However, it is important to remember that the increased counter damage is only effective on his M2s. He has a normal counter bonus for his jabs. Bullet's passive allows him to outspeed the opponent's M1s if they both launched one simultaneously. This is quite hard to time, though, but it is very useful once mastered. Overall, Bullet is a very scary style, as all it needs to turn the tides of a match is a well-placed heavy counter, which is why Bullet is on S tier, above Kamur, but below Smash. Up next is Hands Low. This is a counter style, both known for its mobility and startup speed. Hands Low's base damage is on the lower side, but this doesn't hold it back since it's got a hefty counter bonus on all of his attacks. Looking at its other stats, it's got great dashes and walk speed, allowing Hands Low users to move around the ring effortlessly. Overall, Hands Low is a combination of speed and precision, which is why it is an S tier style. Now, we got the main character, Ippo. The peekaboo style, or more known in the game as Ippo, is a very aggressive style, like its brawler cousin Charge. Overall, Ippo is very well-rounded. It's got its insane damage for offense, a decent block for defense, its high damaging ability for pressure, and an ult that destroys 55% of your opponent's health as a finisher. This style's got it all, but it has one major drawback: its inability to backdash, so you're always forced to stay on the offensive as Ippo. This does not stop him from being a menace, though, since he can be evasive with his Dempsey, but only if you can time it correctly. Also, since he has pretty strong stats overall, Ippo has a fairly low skill floor, meaning you can decently use him and be somewhat good after picking him up for the first time, but his ability raises his skill ceiling by a mile. Ippo is a very strong style that's easy to pick up, but hard to master. This lands Ippo at S tier. Shotgun is the next style on the list. Shotgun stats are okay. It's got a decent dash, decent base damage, and an okay block. Its ability, Barrage, however, doesn't really do much for Shotgun. Sure, it can deplete your enemy's guard quickly, but since casting it consumes all of your stamina, you can't really follow it up for a block break. Not to mention that this ability is easily countered by backdashing. Furthermore, Shotgun is weak to counter damage, and has pretty bad range. Overall, Shotgun has qualities that can put it on top, but is ultimately held back by its weaknesses. This style is pretty fun to use though, and you can dominate the ring, as long as you play your cards right. With that being said, Shotgun is currently at C tier, above counter. Arriving at the last mythic style, we have the king of M2s. I know most of y'all have PTSD from this dude's white fang. I do too. This style pretty much has no real weaknesses. It's got a good dash, fast startup, and heavy damage on his signature M2. Oh, and did I mention that he also shreds blocks? There's really not much else to say to this style. It is broken. Why would you give an M2 that launches as fast as an M1 damage that's stronger than a smash? Anyway, this is another S tier. Phew, finally onto the legendaries. Hitman. You all know how I feel about Hitman. This has got to be one of, if not the most hated style in the game. Great M1 damage, longest reach in the game, fastest startup, a strong guard. This style has no real flaws aside from its somewhat weak dashes, but that's not really a big deal, since you can still effectively weave so long as you conserve your dashes for the right moments. This style is so broken that I felt bad for my opponents for using this style when gathering footage of each styles. You really won't be touched by your opponent if you know how to dodge, since your guard is also rock solid, with excellent defense, and an even better offense. This style needs a nerf. S tier. Next is Ricardo's Boxer Puncher style, or more commonly known in game as the Ghost style. Ghost is by far the most balanced legendary, although it's got mediocre damage. Your M1s are hard to read since they have no indicators, allowing you to land punches consistently. Ghost's M2s also have deceptively long range. They easily outrange Shotgun's barrage, making it a perfect counter to Shotgun. Now, we can't talk about Ghost without mentioning the Ghost Jab. This is the Ghost's exclusive ability, an almost undodgeable, lightning-fast jab. Be careful though, the Ghost Jab has a pretty short range, and if you whiff it, you'll be stunned, so be wary of using it. Anyway, this is a very versatile style that can easily adapt to all situations. That is why it will sit at S tier. Up next, we have... Sorry. Anyway, the Freedom style. This is the most complex style in the game, as it can alternate between three styles: Whirlwind, Smash, and Flicker. Since Freedom has three styles in its arsenal, this style is pretty hard to use to its fullest potential. Having to combine three playstyles means you are never out of options with this style. You can be evasive with Whirlwind since it has the fastest walk speed in the game, and outboxer with Flicker, and gain access to the Smash if you want to deal heavy damage. Additionally, Freedom has zero end lags, except on its M2s. Now on the drawback, this style has a major one. Freedom has 20% less health compared to the other styles, and 10% less compared to Kronos, but we'll talk about that later. This style has a high skill floor and skill ceiling, but mastering it is very rewarding. A style with the greatest potential that's only balanced by its fragility. A solid S tier. Next we got the GOAT, Kamigawa, the Iron Fist. If you're looking for some real damage, then look no further than Iron Fist. This style is very straightforward. It throws hands and throws it hard, so hard that it hurts itself in the process. This style has the strongest M2 in the game, but if you land it, you take half the damage you deal, which makes this style very hit or miss. If you're ahead with Iron Fist, you win hard, but if you're behind, it'd be really hard to catch up because of the self-damage. Don't get me wrong though, this style is still strong, especially with its Insta-KO ultimate, since it destroys 80% of your opponent's health. Looking at its other stats, it's pretty well-rounded as well, with strong M1s, a solid guard, and good dashes. This is a style with overwhelming strength. paired with an equally overwhelming weakness. Iron Fist sits on top of A tier. Next up is Slugger, the hardest hitting style in the game. Slugger's damage is way stronger than average. Additionally, its attacks have anti-heal, leaving you little room for error when going against one. His M2s also deal insane amounts of damage, especially when fully charged. And the fact that Slugger can delay his M2s makes him very hard to predict at times. Furthermore, you can't perfect dodge a Slugger M2, allowing you to cast it safely. This style, however, has pretty bad defense. It's got a weak guard and bad dashes, contrary to Takamura's strength in the anime. Not only that, Slugger also has the slowest startup in the game, but this makes sense, I guess, since every damage he deals is almost unhealable. I've also noticed something weird with this style recently. His reach got a little inconsistent. Sometimes my opponent would be right in front of me, but my punches wouldn't connect. I'm not sure if it's a bug or it's just me. This only began happening recently. Slugger mains, does this happen to y'all too? Anyway, this style is still good overall. Not as dominant as before, but still an S tier style. 2 styles left. Alright, time for another unorthodox. We got Hawk's no guard style. Hawk is an evasive style like Trickster, which means that dodging is crucial for this style. When you look at its stats, you'll notice that aggression is its game. Its weak block forces you to take the fight to your opponent, to take the pressure off of you. Hawk's passive gives him 3 modes: Base, Bloodlust, and Ecstasy. Base is just your default mode. Bloodlust increases your attack speed and adds anti-heal to your attacks. Ecstasy allows Hawk to attack even faster and do almost unhealable damage to your opponents. Hawk is a very strong style, but similar to Slugger, I don't think it retains its former glory, mostly due to its weak guard and over-aggressive playstyle. That being said, Hawk is still really strong, which is why it sits right above Slugger. Lastly, we have the Kronos style. Kronos style is honestly one of the funnest styles in the game, which is why it's kinda sad to see it get held back by its stats. Kronos damage and guard is pretty weak. Pair that with the below average health, a hard to activate ability, and an ult that does less damage when not on focus, and you got another style with great potential, but is limited by its innate weaknesses. One thing that Kronos can boast of is its speed, and if a player can play around it well, they can be speed monsters and style on their opponents, even when disadvantaged with their stats. Right now, Kronos is at C tier. Phew, I didn't expect this to be this long, but there you go. What are your thoughts about our ranking? Please let me know on the comments. Alright, that's all for now. Boom man out. Hey, guys. We have finally hit 50 subscribers today. Thank you so much for the support. We're currently sitting at 58 subs. You guys are amazing. Anyway, please consider liking and subscribing. See y'all in the next one. Peace.